The storm came fast across the Wyoming plains, rolling in like a dark wall that swallowed the horizon. Lightning flashed through the purple clouds, turning the dusty land white for a heartbeat before dropping it back into shadow. The wind carried the smell of rain and danger. Horses across the valley lifted their heads, ears twitching, uneasy. Caleb Turner felt the change before he even saw the storm. He stood outside his barn, one hand resting on the wooden door, the other gripping the rope tied to his nervous buckskin mare. The sky grumbled like an angry beast. Caleb had lived on the frontier long enough to know this storm was different, stronger, meaner. The kind that tore roofs off barns and turned creek beds into roaring rivers. "Easy, girl," Caleb murmured. "We'll get you inside before the sky tries to kill us both." He pulled the mare toward the barn, boots thudding on the dry ground just as the first drop of rain splattered against his hat brim. Another followed. Then a dozen. In seconds the sky split open and rain poured down in thick, heavy sheets. Caleb shoved the barn door open and dragged the mare inside. The thunder cracked so loud it felt like the ground jumped under his feet. Caleb secured the mare and checked the stalls, making sure nothing loose could fly around when the wind hit. His ranch was simple. Just him, his horses, a few cattle, and the memories of a life he used to share with people he'd lost. Living alone had become a habit, easier than facing the world outside his quiet land. He was about to close the barn door when he heard it. A faint sound carried on the storm's roar, a voice, or maybe three. Caleb froze, gripping the edge of the barn door as another flash of lightning lit the yard. The rain blurred everything, but he could make out three shapes moving fast across the mud, stumbling, fighting against the wind. Women. The storm shoved them sideways, nearly knocking one to her knees. Caleb didn't think. He yanked the barn door open wide. "Get inside," he shouted. They ran for it, skirts soaked, hair plastered to their faces. As soon as they crossed the threshold, Caleb slammed the barn door shut. The wind hit it immediately, rattling the wood so hard it shivered. The three women stood dripping on his barn floor, water pooling below their skirts. All of them shivered. All of them looked like they'd been running for miles, but it was their faces that caught Caleb's attention. Fear, exhaustion, and something else. Something sharp and watchful. The eldest woman stepped forward first. She looked to be around 28, with long, dark hair, heavy with rain. Her eyes were fierce and alert, scanning the barn like she expected trouble to step out of the shadows. "Thank you," she said, breathless. We had nowhere else to go." The second woman moved beside her, auburn hair, blue eyes. Younger, maybe 24. She had a cut on her cheek and dirt smeared on her dress. Her gaze locked on Caleb with a mixture of suspicion and challenge. The third woman stayed a step behind the others. She seemed barely 20. Pale, fragile-looking. Her blonde hair clung to her thin face, and she shook like the cold had sunk into her bones. Caleb raised both hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. "You're safe from the storm in here," he said. "Name's Caleb Turner. This is my ranch." The eldest straightened, protective even through her shaking. "I'm Eleanor," she said. She gestured toward the auburn-haired sister. "This is Joe," then to the youngest, "and this is Lily." All three names were said too quickly, too carefully. Fake, Caleb thought. But folks running from trouble sometimes needed false names to survive. He didn't judge them for it. "You three traveling alone in a storm like this?" he asked. Joe lifted her chin. "We didn't have a choice," Caleb didn't push. He'd seen desperation before. It had a look of its own. He grabbed an old blanket from the wall and walked it over, laying it across Lily's shoulders. She flinched at first, then wrapped it tight around herself, nodding a silent thank you. "You can stay here until the storm passes," Caleb said. "It'll blow hard for a few hours." Joe raised an eyebrow at him. The challenge in her eyes was unmistakable. "Think you can handle all three of us?" she asked, her voice rough from cold but carrying an edge Caleb couldn't quite read. Eleanor shot her a warning look, but Joe didn't back down. Caleb held her gaze calmly. "I reckon I can manage," he said. The wind slammed the barn again, hard enough to shake the rafters. Lily jumped and pressed close to her sisters. Caleb noticed the bruises, faint but real, on Eleanor's forearms. He noticed the way Joe kept glancing at the barn door, like expecting it to burst open. And he noticed Lily's terrified eyes, wide and glassy, like she hadn't slept in days. Something was wrong. Something worse than the storm. "We'll be out of your way by morning," Eleanor said quickly. "No rush," Caleb replied. "Storm this strong? It's dangerous to be out there. It's dangerous for us to stay still too long," Joe muttered under her breath. Caleb's jaw tightened. He knew that tone. He knew what fear disguised as anger sounded like. He'd heard it in himself once. "Whatever trouble you're running from," he said quietly, "you don't have to face it tonight." For the first time since they stepped inside, Eleanor's hard expression softened. "Just a little, thank you," she whispered. Caleb nodded and began checking the barn doors again. The storm was no small thing, but as he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling settling heavy in his chest. These three women weren't just lost travelers. Someone was hunting them. And if that someone found their way to Caleb's ranch, everything in his quiet world was about to change. The storm rolled on through the night, pounding the land until the earth turned to mud and the barn roof shook with every gust. Caleb worked in silence beside the sisters, checking that nothing inside could fall or cause harm. Every time thunder cracked, Lily jumped, clutching the blanket tighter around herself. "You three must be freezing," Caleb said. "There's a potbelly stove in the tack room. I'll get a fire started." Joe stepped in front of him before he could move. "Fast. Too fast." "No," she said, voice sharp. "We're fine here." Eleanor touched her sister's arm in warning, but Joe didn't back down. Caleb raised his hands calmly. "You're safe," he said. "If I wanted trouble, I wouldn't have opened the door." Joe held his stare for several tense seconds before she stepped aside, jaw tight. Caleb walked to the tack room, lit a fire, and stepped back to give them space to warm up. The barn glowed soft and orange as the fire grew. Eleanor led Lily to the heat first, rubbing her arms gently. "You're shaking," she whispered. "I'm trying," Lily murmured, fighting tears. "I'm trying so hard," Caleb pretended not to hear, but his stomach tightened. Whatever they'd been through had carved fear into the smallest sister, so deeply it showed in the way she breathed. Joe, meanwhile, paced like a caged animal.